Hi, hope you guys are doing very well. So, we're going to be doing this really amazing session today, which is going to be around solving the paper, right? So, now for all of you to know how the paper is, to get the feel of it, and to be able to strategize, because it's while doing the paper, how do you approach it? What must you do? What must you leave is what really becomes, the deal breaker. And for us, we have to be very thoroughly prepared with what is going to be an answer and what is not. So today we are going to literally restrict within the 40 minutes that we have, and because that's the sectional timing which is given, and what we have in front of you is a typical mock. And in all of the mock, we're going to see how to approach, how to go about with the questions that have been given. Now, different people can have different strategies, which of course you are free to employ, but I will just walk you through how I go through the paper every time I sit in front of the VARC section. And on that note, let us begin. Now, I am going to start with, of course, all of the instructions that need to be read through. Now, for somebody who has given the mocks previously, will know how to, go about with all of this. But for all of the other ones, please understand, guys, it's ultimately what you mark in the sheet. That is what is corrected, and that is what is taken into account. So you will have to be very careful of how you go and how you do not. So on that note, I suppose we must start. Now, first things first, you are to adhere to all of the instructions that have been given out, and you have to do a default tick as to the fact that you've understood the instructions that are there. So it's a normal prompt that you have, which is just absolutely okay, and you don't have to worry about any of that. And then it says, I am ready to begin. Once you are ready to begin is when the real hustle starts. So calm yourself down before you begin. Take a deep breath. Know everything's just going to be all right. And of course, while solving, you can also simultaneously keep punching it in the chat box as to whatever you think the answer is going to be. I will go at a certain speed because once I start, I only have 40 minutes to finish the sectional. So I will have to be very, very I have to be very dedicated, and I will have to be very sincere in the way I read. So of course there's going to be a certain speed, and I will come back to the questions that I feel can be we can go back to, and then we're going to also be checking out what needs to be done. On that note, let us begin. Now I am going to very quickly start. Now, as I said, everybody is free to also keep giving me their answers in the chat box. And with that, let us go. I am ready to begin. Now, starting with the first one. Now, it says there is a sentence that is missing. Now, I cannot underline, guys, so please keep reading with me. Now, it says in the sentence, there is a sentence that is missing in the paragraph below. Look at the paragraph and decide whether option 1, 2, or 3, the following sentence would best fit. So, Diksha marks the initiation of an individual into a monastic life. Okay, so we will possibly have to see which of the following. Now, the moment I say Diksha marks the initiation, I know that it needs to be a starter for my consumption. Let's go. Imagine a young boy and a girl dressed in the robes of a monk reciting prayers in a dimly lit monastery. Now, picture another child engrossed in a classroom, debate about rights, freedom, and the principles enshrined in the modern constitution. Dash. Both hypothetical, so I clearly know one cannot be an answer. Both because we've not introduced Diksha as of now. Both hypothetical scenarios are rich with meanings, but they represent two vastly different lenses through which the young minds perceive. Okay, yet not. As societies strive to balance culture, heritage, and democratic ideals, the question arises: how do we nurture to embrace the constitutional freedom while respecting the traditions of faith? Dash. Many people attain Diksha. Okay, now I know, but since you're talking about attainment, so I know that this can possibly be the place wherein I want to put. So I know that the first answer will have to be option 3 for me, which is D. Okay, so you save in next and then you go on to the next. There is a sentence that is missing from the paragraph. We again have to see which of the following is going to be the perfect fit for it. Okay, let's get on to the next. The high courts of Uttarakhand, Meghalaya, and Tripura have no women judge. Okay. Women in law have seen great progress in over the last years in India. Dash. The first woman lawyer. Okay, so here is not where I will want it. So the first woman lawyer, Sorabji, was entitled to practice in 1924. Since then, the number of women lawyers has increased. Several women have been designated senior lawyers, and there have been many judges in the lower judiciary. Okay, we're still celebrating. However, there remains a glass ceiling for the women in the higher judiciary. Okay, dash. The share of the women, not even here, the share of the women in the high courts is only 14.27. Now we talk about the downfall of it. In eight high courts, the number of women judges is limited to just one. Okay, and then obviously from one comes zero, which means my answer will have to be option four. Okay, getting on to the next, I now have a passage and I need to see which of the following is going to be the right answer for it. So let's begin by reading. The passage is a psychology passage. Clearly, it is on Simon Freud. My psychoanalyst consulting room was brown and functional. There wasn't much inside it, and its walls were bare aside from Claude Monet's The Poppy Field. Okay, it shows a woman in smart 19th century clothes walking through the grass holding a parasol. Impressionism, once revolutionary, had been reproduced so much it has become neutral, inoffensive, the perfect container for the anxieties of waiting room and clinical office. So he's basically describing how the office looks like. At that time, my mood colored everything I saw. The scene felt grey and somber, although looking at it now, I noticed the flashes of blue sky. It was located behind my head in my analyst's eye line. So he's talking about what was visible to the eye. So it would see. So I would see only as it approached the couch. Okay, but I spent many of my early sessions holding in my mind sight. I often thought about why it had been chosen to hang there. I wasn't ready to share my despair with this person whom I did not trust yet. So I returned to the picture obsessively as a clue to who my analyst was and what I might expect to happen in this unfamiliar place. Okay. The artworks in the consulting room shouldn't matter. Psychoanalysis is the talking cure. Its medium in language. Simon Freud's iconic couch was given to him as a present by the patient in 1890. Freud later made it a standard practice for patients to recline. Okay, he found it easier for them and for him to look inwards and to speak. Okay, so now this is about the posture, the recumbent posture that he liked. Gazed at the ceiling rather than someone's face. But the space in which the conversation happens is important. I don't believe I'm the only person who's found themselves talking while also wondering internally how a particular print, painting, or picture got there. Okay, objects prompt association, memories, thoughts, feelings, fantasies, imagining everything. In short, there is the raw material of psychoanalytic work. By virtue of being placed in the vessel of meaning making, that is the consulting room, artworks of all kinds, whatever they are, gain new value. To understand the significance of the art in the psychoanalyst office, it is necessary to consider first Freud's open space. Freud was a devoted collector who assembled more than 2,000 antiquities, all of which were shipped together with his couch, the 20 Marsfield Garden. Okay, to 20 Marsfield Garden, Hampton. Okay, now this is where it was. Neolithic tools, Egyptian or Greek figurines, a bronze model of porcupine were on the desk. The objects gave him immense satisfaction. They drove the development of his theories, feeding it in the interest in the ways that the past is preserved within the present. In particular, how behavior from childhood is repeated into adulthood. Freud diverted his patient's attention from the ceiling to show how his favorite things was deliberately exploited his possession power to evoke. In tribute to Freud, the American poet H.T. analyzed by Freud recalled him putting an ivory statue of Vishnu into her hands. She felt compelled and repelled by its extreme beauty. How a patient responds to psychoanalyst art depends on their personal history. It will always be particular, but psychoanalysts must engage in the problem universal to their profession, how to set up their room, ready patients to come and to project and to fantasize. Clinicians are free to set up their rooms just as they like, just as they come to their own accommodation with Freud's ideas, each finding their own space with their profession. Okay, so it's basically a setup about how things around it are going to be. Let's go. Which of the following conclusion has been made by the author? So, of course, we understand that whatever be the kind of conclusion that we want, it has to be about the fact that the way the entire space was, it had a lot of meaning. Now, let's start. The emotional state of the patient alters their perception of art, making it an unreliable tool for. No, that's not what it is. One has to connect. So, A can't be. Artwork in a psychoanalytic space gains new meaning because they become part of the therapeutic process. Well, yes, because there is some sort of chemistry that needs to be done there with the painting. Freud's personal collection of antiquities were a distraction. No, it weren't. The neutrality of the art in clinical setting ensures that it does not interfere. No, it does interfere. It has to change with your mind. So the answer most likely should be B. Let's get on to question number 4 and see what do we want over here. The author would agree with all of the following except. So which of the following would he not agree with? The physical space of the plays an active role. Agreed. Freud's choice of artifacts in the consulting room was intentional and reflected. Agreed. The absence of the visual stimuli in the psychoanalytic space ensures that a patient's thought remains uninfluenced. Disagree. Hard disagree. 100% ये सही है. Art in a therapeutic setting can evoke emotions and association. Perfect. Well, yes, that is also correct. Okay, which of the following is the best addition? So if there was something that were added to the passage, now what would that be? Now let's see. An exploration of contemporary therapist. No, we don't want to have about the contemporary therapist. Now, either we continue to talk about the psychoanalyst or Freud's way, or basically we move on to, what is the contribution of art to all of the surroundings. Exploration of contemporary therapist out of question. A discussion on how patients often fixate on minor details of the room as form of resistance. Resistance to therapy? No. It has to be some sort of influence to therapy. Can't be. An analysis of why some psychoanalysts prefer empty, it's not about the empty room. So by default, a discussion on how different styles of art, abstract, classical, affect the patient. Right. Now, which of the following keywords? Now, one of the best questions that CAT tends to be having, which of the following is going to be the best keyword? Psychoanalysis, art, Freud. Clearly, because they were my protagonist. Impressionism, emotional, it doesn't have Freud. This doesn't have Freud. I cannot finish the passage without the mention of Freud, so it will have to be A. Okay. Now, the most dreaded of the lot, something that I hate personally, are the parajumbles. Or we might have five jumbled sentences related. Four of them can be put together in a core. Okay, we have to identify the odd sentence in it. But then again, you always have to make sure that you are finding out what should have been a possible series for it. First things first, we will have to read them. In late 1755, Garrison gifted Rind a book by the non-juring bishop who'd ordained him Archibald Campbell. Okay. In 43, Keith was sent to the Fleet prison for his off-the-book activities. Okay. In the age when only 40% of the women in England could read and write. Okay, still continuing. This fact was even more noteworthy. Combined with her letters, Rhine's ownership. So, okay, this is also about the letter. A complex treatise on the principles and commitment of the splinter Orthodox British Church. The text required an advanced level of understanding. Okay, so I know the one statement which is definitely an odd statement will have to be 2. Right? Okay. So I'm pretty sure this one's correct because it will have to be that as an answer. Let's see the next now. Again, odd sentences, what I have to find. Think Doris Lessing's Radical Showstopper, The Golden Notebook, or The Dice Man by Luke. A counter-cultural yarn still spoken of in rap tones by its acolytes. What exactly defines a cult book? Its qualities are subjective, often intangible and niche, though we all know when we have seen it. Okay, what's certain is that the cult classic inspires passionate devotion from among its fans who frequently, okay, these have to come together. Think Peak's quirkily gothic. Okay, now this is also about a cult because it's gothic. So, of course, it has to be a reworked fairy tale. Their fate tells us a little something, not only about the cult novels, why the cult novels fade, but also, okay, now why all of these are things seem to be, uh, the cult books and their development, the rise and the fall of it. This is trying to be talking about, how exactly did that go about? That is, what was the fate of it? Now that I feel needs to be an odd sentence. Now that's what I'm not very confident of this one, but I do feel that this is what should have been the answer over here. Perfect. Okay. Let's try and see. 4 sentences are given in a coherent. Decide the proper sequence for the order and the key in which the 4 statements need to be given up. Now, how much money you make, what is your worth, and how do you assess that? Or would you look at what you do for living? Or would you? Okay, now I know that now I can't have 3 in the starting. 3 will have to come later. Now, 3 will have to come after 4. You know why? Because this also is like a would you. So I found a parallelism here. Now I know that 3 and 4 is definitely a mandatory pair, but it's not an opener. So I'll have to see. Now if I now also symmetry says सारे के सारे क्वेश्चन से स्टार्ट करोगे तो एक फॉर्म लगता है उसमें. तो अगर मैंने उसको what is your worth and how do you assess that? Would you look at what you mean to others, or would you do this? How much money do we make? So while there what would, and then finally how much money. So I know for a fact that the first 3, I always wish there is step marking when we do these. So I feel this is what should be the correct version. Okay, getting back to my stronger suits, the reading comprehension. Let's begin and see, what do we have over here? Now it goes about by saying, in the hands of some of its most gifted practitioners, songwriting is a kind of emotional alchemy. Okay. For the past week, I have been returning to a perfect example. Every time the sun comes up by the singer Sharon, which was released in 2014. It's an almost perfect portrait of self-doubt and downward spiral that captures feelings so deep that you go way beyond the words. Okay. I went back to the song as I read the superb new book that has both educated and profoundly depressed me. Mood Machine by the New York based journalist Liz Pelly is about the music streaming giant Spotify and how it attracted its current 615 million subscribers. But its most compelling story centers on what Spotify has done to audiences' appreciation of songs and the people who make them, much of which is down at the platform's ubiquitous playlist. Thanks to Spotify's algorithm, I recently found every time the sun comes up in the personalized playlist titled Farmers Market, versions of which have been saved by nearly 250,000 listeners. Okay, right. So then it says, thanks to Spotify's I've recently on mine, the song sits alongside such classics like the Rolling Stones' Beast of Burden, Mazzy Stars, Equally Aching, Fade Into You, and Dreams of Fleetwood, whose pathos and depth seem to have been neutralized by their new setting. Summed up in the accompanying blurb, fresh produced, reusable totes, iced coffee, and the lovely spring things. Such is what Pelly calls the relegation of music to something possible, just filling the air. Playlists tend to mean that songs once full of power and emotion get recontextualized and washed off their meaning. And at the same time, Spotify constantly boosts music that have never had those qualities to start with. A type of a latter day music that reaches its apogee in a genre now known as Spotify core. Okay. Pelly traces the birth of the muted mid-tempo and melancholy sound to around 2018. The US singer Billie Eilish seems to have been unwittingly kicked off things, and the result has become inescapable thanks to the kind of Spotify playlist whose titles include the word chill. Okay. Spotify, in effect, encourages musicians to produce the oral wallpaper by showing them the data that proves this is how to make money from the platform. Much music answers such music answers some of the 21st century, as Sally reminds, and offers solace to people who are anxious and overworked, engaged in cycles of trying to focus hard and chill hard. It also helps them sleep, which is one of the functions Spotify capably delivers. And and whether the platform users are awake or slumbering, Spotify core has the quality to make it perfect endless stream. One song's blur into the another, meaning that the app can take left to take over, minimum effort is required. Though Spotify has no direct involvement in its creation, a lot of vapid music, that is bland music, clustered in the playlist is now made for production line suppliers of that of the company calls perfect fit content or PF. Okay, all right. The fact that no money is paid out if the song is listened to for less than 30 seconds has come closer to a killing of the idea of slow burning intro. The limited public outcry from the tiny rewards Spotify offers most musicians and songwriters may be connected to the fact that the average chill playlist is intended only as background music. As Pelly says, it follows that a population paying so little conscious attention to the music would have believed it deserving for so little revenue. Okay, so it's basically celebrating the kind of music that Spotify tends to offer. Okay, and of course the seamless transition. Now the author implies that music should be consumed. So we understand that he said that it needs to have a very engaging experience. It has to be the kind wherein, because throughout the passage he says that music has an emotional power, right? And which is why we have to also have the answer which is going to have some sort of rapport with music and of course the listener. Now, as a tool of mental relaxation, productivity, catering to contemporary lifestyles, okay. But catering to contemporary lifestyles will not fit in because maybe contemporary lifestyle is very hustled. So A can't be. Through an engaged and conscious experience rather than as a mere ambient noise. Yes, it's shor sharaba nahi hai yaar. Matlab, it's something which is a very conscious experience. Makes sense. So far, B seems to be better than A. By allowing algorithm to curate personalized, okay, that's not how music should be consumed. Music is not noise. Music is an experience. So that's what he says. B is not right. C is not right. In a manner that aligns with evolving technological trends and listening. No, that's not what it. Spotify only gets high on the playlist all the things that have made it. That is the recurrence. So I'm pretty sure my answer over here is going to be correct. Okay. Now let's see the next one. Which of the following is a potential flaw? Abhi. Potential flaw क्या हो सकता है? It assumes that all listeners engage with music in the same way, disregarding no. Spotify is not about all the listeners, it's about picking and choosing whoever they are. A can't be. It unfairly criticizes algorithmic curation with acknowledging the role of traditional radio. It didn't do that out of the scope. It exaggerates the negative effects of streaming while ignoring how changing lifestyles demand adaptability in music consumption. No, there's no exaggeration. It's wrong choice. It overlooks the possibility that streaming services have also introduced people to new artists that may not have been otherwise discovered. Well, yes, that is most likely. It overlooks this possibility because Spotify is going to keep playing the songs that are famous, the ones that people are searching about. What about the new people? उनका तो ठप हो गया, उनका तो business ही ठप हो गया. So that is definitely a flaw that Spotify tends to be having. Let's get to the next. Which of the following is a possible paradox that we have? Which of the following is a paradox highlighted in the passage? Streaming platform claim to democratize music access but concentrate well to a few. No, that's not what the paradox is. Listeners seek emotional depth in music but increasingly prefer tracks designed for passive consumption. No, the passage is about active consumption. Be to ho hi nahi sakta. Spotify's algorithm claim to personalize music choices but ultimately homogenize. Yes, of course, पर्सनलाइज करता है बट बार बार बजेगा या टॉप पे तो वही आएगा ना जो सबसे ज्यादा हिट है, जो सबसे ज्यादा प्ले करते हैं. बिल्कुल, तो पैराडॉक्स है. तो आप बोलते हो कि मुझे ये करना है पर फिर मतलब वो बोलते हैं कि आपको ये गाना मिलेगा बट नहीं मिल रहा है. The platform promotes relaxation while reinforcing patterns of overstimulation through constant engagement. No. So I think I have my answer right away. Now, the next question. All of the following assumptions have been made by the author except. So which of the following is not an assumption? Passage लिखा, कितना information granted में लिया है. Songs have intrinsic value that can be lost when decontextualized. Of course, उसने ये सोचा है, ये मेरा आंसर नहीं हो सकता. Algorithms have a significant and harmful influence in music trend. बिल्कुल. Listeners would not use streaming platforms if they were aware of their impact. ये कैसा assumption? ये तो obviously explicit हो गया ना. ये क्यों सोचेगा? ये सोच के थोड़ी author ने passage लिखा है. Financial compensation should be proportional to the artist's creativity, which is not happening in Spotify. या पहले के 30 seconds में अगर किसी ने switch कर दिया तो वो वही बंद हो जाता है. तो ये तो गलत है. ये तो उसने सोचा है. तो which means हमारा आंसर इसमें C है. Okay, all right. Now coherent, decide on a proper sequencing and give the answer. Once again, we are back to being on our parajumbles. So फिर से एक deep breath लेते हैं और फिर चालू करते हैं. When I'm bird watching, I have a particular experience all too frequently. Our mental worlds are lively with such experiences of absence, yet it's a mystery how the mind performs the trick of seeing nothing. Okay. Fellow birders will point to the tree canopy and ask if I can see a bird hidden among the leaves. I scan the tree tops with binoculars, but to everyone's annoyance, I only see the absence of the birds. Now, all what I know is 3 and 4 को साथ में आ रहे हैं क्योंकि वो लोग bird viewing कर रहे हैं. तो ये मुझे पता है कि 3 and 4 cause effect में है. ये चल रहा है. But this is not a starter for us. Right? And then it can all be about, how the experience of the bird watching is all about. So we can probably start with this and then talk about this one incident which is continuing on the experience of it. And then ultimately, 2 is like a conclusion कि हमारा कैसे mind tricks us to seeing nothing. So if I say 1, 3, 4, 2, I think that should make a perfect source for us. Okay. Now my favorite of the lot, more than the reading comprehensions, I tend to like the summaries. In the context of International Women's Day on March 8, it is pertinent to note that India is making notable strides in empowering women, with government policies playing a crucial role in transforming women's access to sanitation, clean water, financial inclusion, entrepreneurship. Okay. These initiatives, paired with broader social and economic change, are reshaping women's role in governance in the workplace, community leadership across the country. The journey towards women's empowerment in India took a significant step forward with the launch of the Swachh Bharat Clean India mission, an initiative that was aimed not just at building toilets but also improving the dignity, the safety, and the well being of the women across the country. The mission focused on ending open defecation, especially in rural areas where women. Okay, so it's about how India is marching forward on International Day. We're celebrating and all about the Swachh Bharat. So these are my 3 things that I need. India has made significant strides in women empowerment. Government policies improving sanitation, financial inclusion, entrepreneurship. The Swachh Bharat Abhiyan played a key role in enhancing the dignity and the safety while addressing open defecation defecation challenges, especially in rural areas. Perfect. Let's reserve this. On International Women's Day, it is important to acknowledge India's progress in a women's empowerment, particularly through, okay, no, not particularly through this. These initiatives, now all of these have played a lot of role, and of course, the Swachh Bharat has been a significance. It's not particularly just this, B can't be. Women empowerment in India has improved due to socio-economic reforms, particularly in governance and employment. The Clean India Mission was an important initiative aimed at improving rural sanitation and addressing concerns related to open defecation. Okay, now we have to understand that in the passage, of course, there has been a lot of, but it's just not the economic and the social. I mean, there's been entrepreneurial aspect also. अभी भी A ज़्यादा better है C से. C भी ठीक है, but not otherwise. India has made efforts to improve sanitation, economic opportunities for women, but challenge, okay, no, challenges remain, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. Okay, once again, let's get on to the next passage that we have. It's about the African elephant. Now, the African elephant in the room. Is there such a thing as true carbon neutral safari? I suppose there is a spreadsheet. It might be possible, says Lisa Scriven, General Manager of Fair Trade Tourism and Africa Coordinator of Green Destinations. Data manipulation loopholes and even differing opinions of what defines a carbon neutral camp make it difficult to know how strict safari operators are being when they tout for label. For example, Scriven says that some lodges claim to be carbon neutral yet decline to calculate their scope 3 emissions, which include everything they don't produce. Okay, in remote Africa, where every supply, guest, employee, and bottle of imported champagne must travel long distances to reach the private concession in the middle of the Serengeti or Delta, this cost can quickly skyrocket. Okay, obviously, both Keffer and Scriven also warn about against blindly buying into the promises of carbon offsetting, which most carbon neutral operators include automatically as a levy or offer for a fee to guests. To be effective, a reputable carbon offset program should be linked directly to the destination you're visiting and invest in climate justice. When in doubt about the legitimacy of the camp's initiatives, Scriven suggests checking with a third party, such as Credible Carbon. In the worst case scenario, a well meaning lodge may not purchase their carbon credits wisely. Unfortunately, the market will have become rife with scams. Even when the safari comes close to the carbon neutrality, sustainability expert agrees that achieving net zero carbon emission alone is not enough to ensure a long term eco friendly future. In fact, it can distract from bigger, more relevant. I think when a business says they're carbon neutral, that's there's immediate oh, says Scriven. It's not greenwashing because they are carbon neutral. Maybe they are, but it can be very misleading in terms of the potential burden they're placing on the destination. Grant, managing director of the safaris in Zambia, agrees. Just because a company is climate positive does not mean it's taking good care of the wildlife, the habitat, the local people, of the economy of Zambia. All of these are just important, in my view, more important. There's good news, however. Most so, until now blaming, now good news. More responsible safari brands that than ever before are reducing the carbon emissions by simultaneously developing multifaceted standards that extend throughout the nature-based tourism businesses that include some of Africa's top purpose-driven safaris, such as Signeta and Swalu, defines a commitment through the 4 Cs framework: conservation, community, culture, and commerce. Originally a cattle ranch, the property has transformed into East Africa's largest private conservatory reforestation program and a thriving wildlife sanctuary with plans to reintroduce critically endangering rhinos. Located in Laikipia, Kenya, the region's known for historic land injustices since the colonial British government pushed the Maasai out of the early 20s. These prioritize in relationship of the neighboring villages. Carbon neutrality is one part of sustainability, but we focus a lot more on the community, says Joy, program manager. Okay, of sustainable initiatives. We empower them to be a part of value chain by providing employment opportunity, bursaries, education, medical care. In addition to community work, conservation is a standard key. Protecting animals from poachers, using environmentally responsible building material, reducing waste at a starting point. But forward-thinking brands are taking the initiative a step further with transformative biodiversity and environmental management projects. In South Africa and beyond, FINDA are working on the pangolin reintroduction program while workers are creating a critical buffer zone for mountain gorillas. Okay, so companies are not as they look out to be, but there are a few who are taking some serious initiatives. Which of the following statement would the author most likely agree with? Which of the following is true? A sustainable framework that prioritizes ecological preservation and local community welfare is more comprehensive than one focused solely on emissions neutrality. Perfect, that is what he wants. Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. The legitimacy of the safari environmental claims can only be evaluated through the commitment. No, it's not an only option. Achieving net zero emissions is a definitive indicator of the tourism. No, that's not what it is. In fact, that's been criticized. Carbon neutrality is an effective standalone solution for mitigating no community work. A. Which of the following situations can aptly underscore the author? So if you want to underscore it, you want to strengthen it. So we do a +1. Whatever the author says, we are also going to underscore that idea. A scandal emerges where a major safari brand is exposed for falsely claiming carbon neutrality while neglecting local conservation and right, perfect, because that's what the brands are doing. The brands are only showing कि हाँ हम बहुत कर रहे हैं पर वो कुछ कर नहीं रहे. बिल्कुल यही हो गया मेरा. A safari lodge achieves complete carbon neutrality before it's shut down due to financial. That's not my plot then. A nature reserves focuses exclusively on emission reduction while continuing environmentally destructive. That's not going to be because we want to save. A government mandates that all tourism businesses must. Okay, that's out of scope. The author makes the argument that. So the kind of argument that I simply want has to be that sustainability होनी चाहिए, उनको 4Cs लेने चाहिए and carbon neutrality चाहिए. बस यही आंसर चाहिए मुझे. Carbon offset programs are the most reliable, most explicit. हटा दो. Net zero carbon claim should be the primary focus while assessing. No, sustainability in tourism must encompass conservation, community well-being, ethical practice rather than just मतलब वो भी और ये भी बिल्कुल. Tourism business must prioritize financial stability. भगा दो, ये ऑप्शन तो बहुत ही गड़बड़ है यहाँ पे. Which of the following is going to be the most suitable title for the passage? So again, if I am to give the most suitable title, let's see. Which of the following is it going to be here again? Beyond carbon neutrality, rethinking. Perfect. एकदम सही है. Dramatic है, सही है. The illusion of green tourism, how carbon offset mislead. But see passage वो तो mislead वाला first paragraph था. But हमने ये भी तो बात की कि हमें कैसे उसको change करना है. बिल्कुल सही है. Eco tourism भी नहीं हो सकता. Eco tourism's carbon trap, the hidden cost of offsetting in safari. No. कार्बन क्रेडिट एंड कंजर्वेशन सी पैसेज का टाइटल देना है, पैराग्राफ का टाइटल नहीं देना है, तो ऑब्वियसली इसमें ये इस पैसेज में तो हम 100% श्योर दैट आंसर यही होगा. ओके, लेट्स गो अगेन. वी हैव 12 मिनट्स. आई थिंक वी आर डूइंग अ डिसेंट टाइम. अब इसको पढ़ने के बाद आई माइट जस्ट टेक लाइक अ मोमेंट ऑफ ब्रेक टू बी एबल टू सी. Throughout the 90s, naturalists began looking to Earth to answer the question of the present location in time. Geology had begun consolidating as a science. Ahead of the digging into the planet, the first geologists assumed that they might find proof of nothing really changing throughout Earth's history. They expected remains of everything currently alive on the surface to be located even in the deepest strata. Some predicted that if we dug to the Earth's crust, we would find human remains. When scientists began peeling Earth open, revealing the fossil records testimony, this isn't what they found. Not only did the elder strata entirely look organic remains, but also noticed skeletons change drastically, becoming less familiar, and further back in time they looked. Okay, in the 1700s, early geologists expected to find modern organisms preserved throughout Earth's layer, even at its core. However, fossil evidence contradicted their assumption, revealing that the life form changed over with deeper layers. यार पता नहीं क्यों ये भी सही लग रहा है मेरे को. आगे देखते हैं. The study of geology in the 70s aim to locate the present. Okay, aim to locate वाला तो गड़बड़ हो गया, हटा दो. Early geologists believed that the Earth's history was static, and was it about the fact that they were static? See, now the time is growing on me. I am not able to focus and get back whatever I thought. Ahead of the digging. See, इसलिए time कभी नहीं देखना चाहिए. जितना आप time देखोगे ना उतना ज़्यादा. See, you see the anxiety? This is what is happening. I'm not able to recollect the data that is happening. I was best when I was not looking at the time. Okay, I can't find aim to locate them, so aiming वाला बात नहीं है, तो B तो नहीं है. Early, अच्छा sorry, static भी नहीं है, हटा दे. The development of geology in the 70s led the scientists to study the Earth's layer, expecting to find similar forms at all depths. However, fossil evidence revealed that life has changed over the years. The older strata containing increasingly unfamiliar remains. Okay, less familiar can be unfamiliar. Can we do that? Maybe. Let's see. But then between A and I feel A seems to be the answer. So we'll just go with this. Okay, thankfully. Let's breathe. Last step now. Last passage. Hai. So let's read it through to be able to know. Countless legal standards ask what a reasonable person would do. But who is this person? The reasonable person is not just the average person. That's easily seen. Sometimes average people do unreasonable things. This insight has led theorists to propose that reasonable person are some ideal person, such as virtuous person, the person who achieves the best consequence, or the person who acts in accord with the moral duty. But this is all too quick. A reasonable person isn't just the average person, but neither is it simply the ideal person. Instead, a reasonable person represents someone who is both common and good. The reasonable person is often associated with the law of accidents. To determine whether someone is legally responsible for causing an injury, courts apply a test of reasonable care. Did the person causing the injury act with the reasonable care of the reasonable person? But reasonableness sets countless other legal standards. Was a killing reasonably provoked? Would advertisements have misled a reasonable consumer? Was a contract offer accepted in a reasonable time? Was a criminal trial reasonably delayed? Reasonableness appears within the law, okay, in all of these. Theorists often mark that a reasonable person is not an average person. As the American legal philosopher Peter Weston puts it, reasonableness is not an empirical or statistical measure of how average members of the public think, feel, or behave, but Rather, reasonableness is a normative measure of ways in which it is right for persons to think, feel, and behave. The fact that a reasonable person can't be an average person inspires ideal theories for the reasonable person of the reasonable person. The UK's Supreme Court elaborates this view on which facts about average people are entirely irrelevant. Sorry, ये तो गलत mark हो गया गलती से. Evidence about the ordinary people is besides the point. The behavior of a reasonable man is not established by the evidence of the witness, but by the application of the legal standard of the court. In this view, the reasonable person is some ideal person, as the Supreme Court observed, is the anthropomorphic conception of justice of the court itself. Of course, when the court itself reflects the judgment of ordinary jurors. Perhaps surprisingly, the question of how ordinary people judge reasonableness is largely neglected. When people evaluate a standard of reasonable care, it might be that they're considering the common level of care or a good level of care, or perhaps they're considering both. While reasonableness should not be purely statistical standard, it is also rarely a purely prescriptive one. Real legal standards don't elaborate the reasonable person as a virtuous person. The jurors aren't actually instructed to evaluate reasonable care as whatever leads to the best consequence. To the contrary, when the law does elaborate reasonableness, it often suggests statistical consideration. For example, to challenge a misleading advertisement, plaintiff must show that the reasonable consumer would have been likely deceived or misled. The standard is not meant to identify what should mislead an ideally scrupulous consumer. Instead, facts about when people are typically misled are crucial. Most courts consider statistical consideration, and some even call the consumer survey and other evidences demonstrating that an advertisement actually tends to mislead consumers. Historically, courts have referred not just to reasonable person but also to ordinary person. Often, court seems to gesture towards some mix of what is common and good. So ultimately, they go about our standards should set by an ideal average prudent man. Okay. So basically, ढंग का काम करो, अच्छे से रहो. The author asserts all of the following except. So which of the following is false? Ulta question hai. The reasonable person standard does not rely exclusively on what the majority does. True. Can't be. Courts primarily define a reasonable person as an embodiment of moral virtue. No, that's not what it is. तो ये तो except में आ सकता है ना मेरा answer. The assessment of reasonable care often incorporates both empirical and legal norms. True. Jurors may interpret the reasonable person standard by considering both common and ideal. True. हमें तो except बताना है ना. False. True false कर लोगे ना तो हमेशा आसान हो जाता है आंसर. Right? So it will have to be, of course, this I'm very sure of. True false करके निकाल दिया ना. The author would agree that reasonableness is. So क्या होना है आंसर? It is going to be both a combination of the empirical studies and कुछ ऊपर पढ़ा था ना, the moral duties. अब वही purely ethical इसको यहीं पे हटा दो, नहीं हो सकता. Legal construct shaped solely by empirical, explicit solely empirical नहीं, दोनों है. Hybrid concept that blends normative to empirical, perfect. Theoretical standard that exists independent. ये तो देखो purely solely independently इन words में ही हट गया, explicit हो गया. It's a combination option. तो ये मेरा आंसर है. I'm 100% sure ये मेरा correct आंसर होगा. Okay, let's see the next one. Which of the following is the best follow-up question to the author? Next question अगर होता तो क्या हो सकता था? Should reasonableness be entirely explicit? नहीं हो सकता. AI पे कैसे आ गए? हटा दो. How does the concept of reasonableness differ from civil and criminal law? अच्छा law की बात ऊपर हो गई तो ये last question के line में नहीं आ सकता था. No, it can't. How does cultural difference influence the legal interpretation of a reasonable person? See, towards the end, we ended on a reasonable person, right? Ideal, average, prudent man. तो उसी पे तो continue करेंगे. D. You just have to make a mandatory pair to be able to see. And the last one. What does the Supreme Court mean in the observation? The anthropomorphic conception of justice. Okay. Now, obviously, when the Supreme Court goes about by saying about the anthropomorphic justice, it is anthropomorphic is going to be anything that's going to be about the society, about the humans. But हमें इस आंसर को करने के लिए ढूंढना तो पड़ेगा. ये रहा ना. The UK Supreme Court elaborates the view. No, this is not where it is. Guys, हमारा ये कहाँ गया? Reasonableness. Okay, here it is. Here it is. Okay. एक लाइन ऊपर से पढ़ेंगे. The behavior of a reasonable man is not established by the evidence but by the application of the legal standard. On this view, the reasonable person is some ideal person, as the Supreme Court observed, is the anthropomorphic conception of justice, the court itself. So anthropomorphic over here is being used as a figure of speech, something that has been given life. So what is it basically? It is simply, it's just, court is just not a body. In fact, it's the one place which is going to give out those decisions. जस्टिस इज एन एब्स्ट्रैक्ट कॉन्सेप्ट दैट रिमेन्स सेपरेट, सेपरेट नहीं है, इंडल्ज्ड है, ये नहीं हो सकता. कोर्ट embodies justice making legal rulings, not just decisions but representations of decision. Very good, मिल गया हमको, representation वाला आंसर आ गया. Legal institutions function as intermediaries enforcing pre-existing, ऐसी कोई बात नहीं थी. The conception of justice is shaped more by public sentiment. That is not more or less. It is the fact that when you say anthropomorphic consumption, anthropomorphia और anthropomorphic is a figure of speech जिसमें हम लोग animation डाल देते हैं, मतलब किसी non living चीज को living बना देते हैं. So it has to be beyond just a structure of body, but not otherwise. So yes, that is what it is. And I think with that, we are done. Always save 2 minutes of your time to be able to see the questions. I think हम लोगों ने बहुत properly पूरा discuss भी कर लिया. कुछ छूटा होता है तो हमेशा वापस आने के लिए end में 2 minutes 2 minutes छोड़ा करो. That's very important, right? And with that, I think we can submit the paper. So we've answered all, and are you submitting it? Yes. Oh my God, we did get one answer wrong. Which one was it? Oh God, एक तो गलत हो गया अपना. कौन सा गलत हुआ होगा? Do you have any guesses around it? I think we will really have to see. Let's go to the report. We would want to see. Obviously, if I'm the only person giving this, I will have a rank 1. So that's pretty funny. But ठीक है, एक बार देखते हैं अभी कि हमारा मॉक रिपोर्ट देख लेते हैं. रिपोर्ट एक बार देख लेते हैं, because I would want to go to the solutions. Okay, I think इधर तो हमारा सब सही ही था. I just want to see section wise comparison भी ठीक था. I think all is okay that ways. Yeah, इतना तो para summary. Oh God, no. Medium easy थे सारे questions. Medium questions 35. Okay, just seeing statistically, right, कि कहाँ पे क्या हुआ है. I think इन सब में तो नहीं होगा अपना. स्किप कोई किया नहीं था, but then this was a very easy work. मैम आप मेरा पेपर लिख दो. Oh, I wish I could, but ऐसे आ जाते हैं. नहीं, ये आए क्योंकि this was a very easy mock, don't you think? एक बार अब आप इसको भी, I will have this PDF attached with you guys. देखो तो एक बार. I am sure you will know how to do it. Because इसमें ऐसा कोई भी क्वेश्चन नहीं था तो पैराजम्बल्स आर वेरी इजी. देखो ट्रिक हमेशा पैराजम्बल्स में होता है. और हमारे पास साइकोलॉजी का सिर्फ एक पैसेज था विच वाज साइमन फ्रॉइड. अच्छा, लकीली मेरे को साइमन फ्रॉइड बहुत पसंद है. ठीक है, तो मेरा इसीलिए बैठा. उसके अलावा देखो एक मॉरल पे था, एक उसमें था, वन वाज ऑन द सफारी थिंग, वो तो बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग था. इट वाज अबाउट कार्बन एमिशन. सो सी रिलेटेबिलिटी हेल्प्स. क्यों मेरा पैसेजेस अच्छे हुए? क्योंकि आई वाज वेरी रिलेटेड, आई कुड रिलेट टू ऑल ऑफ दोस थिंग्स. स्वच्छ भारत पे क्वेश्चन आ गया, ये सब चीजें हो जाती है. ऑड सेंटेंस परफेक्ट निकल आता है, वो भी बहुत इजी था बिकॉज वो तो एकदम पड़ा हुआ था. सो आई डोंट नो, आई मीन आई वुड कॉल द एलओडी ऑफ दिस एनीवेयर बिटवीन इजी टू मीडियम. तो शायद मेरी किस्मत अच्छी थी कि इतने आसान वाले हो गए. बट गाइज आई एम वेरी श्योर, आई मीन आई हैव अ लॉट ऑफ फेथ ऑन यू गाइज कि तुम लोग बहुत ही बढ़िया करोगे. एंड अगर आपने देखा होगा कि हाँ, फ्रॉइड कैट भी पूछता है, तो थोड़े साइकोलॉजिकल पैसेजेस जो है ना साइकोलॉजी के पढ़ लो. साइकोलॉजी जो किंग्स हैं, साइमन फ्रॉइड हो गया अपना, रोसो हो गया अपना, ये सब जितने लोग हैं इनके बारे में भी पढ़ लो, बहुत ज्यादा जरूरी है ये. ठीक है, ओके. बस इतना याद रखना गाइज, एक रीडिंग कॉम्प्रिहेंशन को करने के लिए 6.5 मिनट से ऊपर आप नहीं लोगे. अगर आपने उससे ऊपर लिया तो आपका नहीं होगा पैसेज. So please make sure that that's going to be something that, oh no, please don't have a replica of your. अच्छा, एक अपना Spotify का पैसेज था. So ये देखो, आप रिलेटेबिलिटी देख लो. Spotify हम यूज करते हैं. कार्बन एमिशन आजकल चल रहा है विद वो अंबानी का कौन सा आ गया है, व्हाट इज दैट, उसके बेटे ने खोला है वंतारा. तो वंतारा को लेके बहुत कार्बन एमिशन का हम लोग आर्टिकल्स पढ़ ही रहे, साइमन फ्रॉइड वैसे ही मेरा है। एंड द लास्ट वाज अबाउट मोरालिटी। सो यू सी आई वाज लकी टू हैव read, which is why we keep saying read, because the more you read, the more diversified you get. And this is what happens, you're able to read faster because you are doing a lot of mind mapping, and your structural idea gets better, right? यस आप ये भी कर सकते हो, सिर्फ पैसिव नहीं। तो अगर आपको सिर्फ रीडिंग कॉम्प्रिहेंशन को करना है, फोकस करना है, तो सिर्फ आरसीज को करो और पैरा समरीज प्लीज। ऑड सेंटेंस पैरा समरी कर लेना, पैरा जंबल भले छोड़ देना, ठीक है? ओके गाइज, सो दैट्स गोइंग टू बी इट। थैंक यू सो मच, इट वाज वेरी फन या बहुत ही मजा आया आज ये करके। मे बी आई विल सी यू गाइज अगेन, एंड फिर और उसको प्रैक्टिस करेंगे। ओके, थैंक्स गाइज, बाय।